Trank Shot is back. Hunter's Mark is a GCD pain. Kill Shot brings Execute once again, but what we really needed was Eyes of the Beast, baby. But not all. New talents, some fucking Hanzo-like Covenant abilities make BM pretty promising. And we will check everything Beast Mastery in Shadowlands in this video. A quick disclaimer, as of recording this video, we are in the early stages of the alpha. That means numbers are not final, abilities are not final, hopefully. And we are playing with some character templates that are a bit gimped in terms of stats and GCD handling, so take all of this with a grain of salt. Also, like and comment if you want to see more alpha impressions and class coverage. You know, the YouTube's things, down below. Let's talk abilities coming back. Not too many at the moment, at least rotational wise. Kill Shot makes a return. It's a very welcome return as far as playstyle goes. It adds a button to press, which is always amazing for Beast Mastery, but also makes execute phases a bit exciting. Currently, shit dies really fast. Questing through Revendreth makes this a guaranteed kill. In dungeons, with the current numbers, you can use it pretty much once per mob, cause they die and everyone and their mom have executes now. The 10-second cooldown is a bit awkward and it will need to be offset by some damage scaling later on. It's definitely a welcome change, but in AoE it's kind of a bummer to press and then just go back to pleb auto-shooting the rest of the mobs down. Would be nice for it to have some interaction with a kit, similar to Marksman. Maybe it can cleave with Beast Cleave. Maybe it can have its cooldown reduced by pressing kill command and lower its damage in return. That would make the execute phase a bit more interesting, but for now we are glad you are back, Kill Shot. Another combat return is Hunter's Mark. In BFA it's a talent, so marksmanship gets a replacement. As for Beast Mastery, it's kind of a bother, similar to Marksman. It has the same issue as on live, it takes a GCD to cast. This really should be changed. It's a pain to use in AoE, having to wait 1.5 seconds, considering the BM kit kind of wants you to use every GCD possible to not cap on focus or reduce the cooldown of X ability. The 5% damage increase is nice. It's boring, but nice. Keep it on the GCD, sure, but I don't know, give us a 5% extra chance to proc Wild Call. Now that would be amazing, and it would be upgraded from a shit alt numpad 0 keybind to a number 1 keybind. Do you remember the times? Of course you don't. N'Zoth took care of fucking people up with corruption. But we once had Trank Shot. On live, this is the Spirit Shock, Spirit Beast pet ability, which only BMs had. Trank Shot is a bit more iconic and does not force us to not use a Bloodlust pet with a 15% leech. Although Trank Shot has more nostalgia and is definitely a more hunter-y feel, it's a bit shitty that we lost some pet identity. Through all of this unpruning, personally I hope pets families become a thing again, since that's really the real reason I actually fell in love with BM as a kid with no friends and no Tamagotchi. Arcane Shot is another baseline ability that currently, with the stats on hand, does 33% more damage per focus point spent than Cobra Shot. The main issue here is that it has no interaction with the spec outside of focus dump. It does arcane damage as opposed to physical, which, I don't know, this isn't an old school RPG anymore where the devs design mobs with physical or magical armor in mind where damage type would actually matter. Plus, Cobra Shot reduces the cooldown of kill command, and if you take certain talents, does a bit more as well. That's very little incentive to press Arcane Shot. Either buff its damage more or take it off the GCD or add an effect to it. Maybe to increase your pet's family trait for 10 seconds or something. Maybe get 20% leech instead of 15%. I don't know. In 2020, to have an ability that does mediocre damage in a spec designed with every ability of its own synergizing with at least one other ability of its own feels like a waste to press. Again, numbers could change, but if they don't, we can hope for legendaries to give us something more for Arcane Shot. Scare Beast is an interesting return as well, another old school staple of hunters that makes a lot of sense. With the AoE cap changes, this could prove useful in dungeons where you get some pack beasts that can be difficult to handle, considering you are already limited on how many targets you can hit. Taking one out of the fight can add some flavor and maybe some versatility in hierarchies, who knows. Eagle Eye and Eyes of the Beast are making a return also, to add some lost flavor back to the hunters, and more flavor is always better. Lastly, I mentioned the AoE cap. Yes, Beast Cleave will now be limited to a maximum of 5 enemies for its effect. This is in tune with all the specs getting their AoE target capped as well. The change here is debatable because it relies heavily on their encounter design, specifically for Mythic Plus. If we don't have to pull 3 packs at once to make the timer, then the cap is fine. So far, we managed to test the Kyrian and Venthyr Covenant abilities. The other two look pretty cool, but without any sort of gameplay, it's hard to tell how they actually feel and function. First off, the Kyrian ability seems very well aimed at beast mastery. It fires an arrow on the ground that lights up the area and the mobs inside. You can hit them even by being behind walls and stuff, and you have 30% extra crit chance. The line of sight can become interesting in encounters where you actually have to LOS the targets, I don't know, maybe even raid bosses, and the crit chance is pretty self-explanatory how good it is. Being on a 1-minute cooldown isn't that bad either, although it's kind of hard to align it with Bestial Wrath at the moment with the current haste and crit levels. It offers a small AoE burst with the extra crit it provides, which BM never really had outside simple beast cleaving with cooldowns up. The Venthyr one is super interesting as well. Flayed Shot seems to be a bit more marksmanship themed, but it's still nice for single target. It fires a shot that deals a bleed dot for 20 seconds, which deals a fair bit of damage. Every time the dot ticks, you have a 15% chance to enable Kill Shot to be used regardless of the target's HP situation. This is a bit tricky to judge and to use since it's currently not available in dungeons yet, and although it doesn't specify, the proc also resets the cooldown, and in a big boss execute phase you can end up with a lot of kill shots cast. Personally, I enjoyed the Flayed Shot more, and if I had to raid with BM, I would definitely go Venthyr at the moment, at least before we get to play with the other two Covenant abilities. Things will definitely change by the time the game goes live, and we will do our best to keep you updated. With all the abilities and unpruning, some talents had to be addressed as well, and they have. The first row remains the same, although Animal Companion has some bugs at the moment where it won't attack sometimes, and the way pets scale can really define what options we pick here and later on. Otherwise, no changes so far. On the next row, Chimera Shot and One with the Pack remain the same. Chimera Shot was the default pick at the beginning of BFA before we got the Dance of Death traits to make One with the Pack way stronger. So the situation can work in reverse in Shadowlands, unless we get some legendaries or set bonuses that can make us go away from Chimera Shot. However, Scent of Blood has changed, and I actually play with it the most since the numbers are always subject to change. The new Scent of Blood gives you 2 charges of Barb Shot once you use Bestial Wrath. I was a bit skeptical at first coming from a BFA mindset, but this talent so far feels the best in the current alpha iteration. The first effect is that it reduces the overall cooldown of Bestial Wrath by 24 seconds simply by giving you the 2 extra Barb Shot charges. On pull, it has the added effect of getting you to 3 stacks of Frenzy immediately. On live servers, we had the Primal Instincts Azorite trait that gave you a charge of Barb Shot when you casted Aspect of the Wild, so this is an upgraded version of that. On top of all of this, it adds a nice flow to the rotation since on Alpha, and probably a bit at the beginning of Shadowlands, keeping 3 stacks of Frenzy 100% of the time will be a tad difficult. The survivability row is also unchanged, with the actual change coming on the 4th row. Venomous Bite was replaced with Spitting Cobra, which itself was also changed. Spitting Cobra still summons a Cobra at the end of Bestial Wrath, only this time it gets empowered by 10% for every Cobra shot you casted during Bestial Wrath. I know I said that numbers are subject to change, but this one is incredibly underwhelming. Spamming Cobra Shot during Bestial Wrath doesn't seem to make it worth it still, so numbers will definitely have to change. The concept of it is interesting if they make the damage of it actually matter enough to change your rotation where you prioritize Cobra Shot instead of Kill Command, which kind of works against itself since Cobra Shot also resets Kill Command. Otherwise, it can simply become a passive dot with no impact on your rotation. As far as I could test it personally, Mastery does not affect your Cobra, which is weird. And why, Blizzard? So far, versatility seems to have a bigger impact. It still bugs out at max range, and if you take Animal Companion with it, it deals less damage, significantly less. Like, what? So this kind of doesn't really make sense for Beastmaster in the way that the rotation is made to feel and synergize with itself, specifically talking about Cobra Shot and Kill Command here. The mobility row is the same, similar to the AoE 6th row, with the added disclaimer that Barrage is also target capped but at 8 targets. And since we had the Spitting Cobra redesigned and moved down a few rows, in its place we have a new ability! Bloodshed is a 1-minute cooldown, 18 seconds bleed on the target that gives your pet 15% extra damage. So far, this does not affect your Animal Companion, and not really sure if it's intended that way, although it should, at least thematically. With no proper add-ons or simming capabilities, I can only assume this is a design choice and it's underwhelming. It's a nice 1-minute cooldown, adds a bit of flavor and more depth to the rotation, but so far, it's a more boring Bestial Wrath with less damage and affecting only your main pets. As a last row talent, I really hope they added more to this, so I'll definitely keep my eyes open. Final impressions, damage numbers aside, all specs feel clunky and awkward, specifically with the GCD situation. BM isn't fundamentally a complicated spec, but we should really take another look at the GCD system. With no talents taken, to start your combat you need to Hunter's Mark, Bestial Wrath, Aspect of the Wild, Barb Shot to start your rotation. And all of these are on the global cooldown, and all are essentially accomplishing nothing aside from your Barb Shot. Nothing practical happens by just pressing these, and this is 3 empty GCDs and 1 to start your rotation with. Add to this potential other global cooldowns and you get Dire Beast, Chimera Shot, Murder Crows, and Bloodshed, and you more than double your opener's GCD cost. And this is a barbaric and rough way to look at it, sure, I know, but there's just too many abilities you want to put on cooldown before you can just get back to keeping Frenzy up. It's nice to have these buttons, but if the global cooldown system doesn't change or cannot change to something else in the rotation, maybe make Bestial Wrath put a 10-second cooldown on Bloodshed, and maybe vice versa. Otherwise, there is really no reason for us to not pair these up, and pressing either one doesn't do much. What, Bloodshed sends your pet into a frenzy and applies a bleed that does a bit more damage than Kill Command for 18 seconds? It doesn't really feel like a last row talent to me. The devs are on the right track with BM though, yet things seem unfinished and I can only hope that it's because they are. Is the spec simple and easy to pick up, or is it a cooldown / GCD juggle fest? BFA fixed class issues with traits and essences and corruptions, essentially applying layers on top of systems of player power. They don't want that for Shadowlands, so as a player I expect the spec to work on its own with no help from Covenant and Legendaries, which should be just upgrades or supplements to a hopefully functional spec. This is only the first iteration, and the True Shot Lodge community is testing a lot of stuff on their own, so you should check them out for any updates that we might miss. All of this is made possible in no small way by our Patreons. Thank you for supporting us, guys, and keep your eyes peeled for more Shadowlands content. If you are also interested in supporting us a bit more, the link to our Patreon page with the details and goodies is down below. Thank you for watching the video. Keep your eyes tuned for more alpha coverage. I'll see you in the next one.